Well, morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending wherever it is you are in the world. It's good to be with you today to look at the Pearson Edexcel International GCSE English as a Second Language. In the module that we're going to consider today, we're going to think about reading and writing. And then for those of you who are going to stay with this and join us again on Wednesday. On the Wednesday, we'll look at the listening and speaking skills. Although some of the things that we say, of course, will overlap. I'm presenting on my own today, and we have quite a big group of people. So what I would like to do is just to ask you to save questions until the end, and we'll spend about an hour and a half to look at the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation we can take any questions that you would like to ask. It's always difficult to look at the chat and present and do several things at the same time. So let's get started, and I'll talk you through. As I say, we should be about an hour and a half or so to look at the parts of the specification, and then we'll allow some time for questions and discussion. So what I would like to know, however, is just if you could, I think we can probably just do this in the chat. Would you like to say if you're currently teaching the International Pearson, the 2017 specification as well? We're in that sort of overlap here. So could I get you just to say whether you're currently teaching that specification? Just pop a note in the chat. Yes, some people saying yes. Okay, so we have a sort of a mixture, probably more no than. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's interesting. That's interesting to know. Okay. So I'm just going to sort of talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do today. We're going to have a look at the new specification, and it's not totally new because some of you will be started already. We're going to look at understanding the assessment objectives for the qualification. And when we say assessment objectives, those are, if you like, the things that we are testing. So that those are the skills that we are testing. We're going to look at the two skills of reading and writing, and do that with reference to the sample assessment materials. And you'll be aware that there are sample exams. These are examples of what the exams that the students will do are going to look like. And so they're a good guide to the structure of the paper and the way in which the questions will work. And we're going to have then a look at the understanding the assessment of both skills. And we're going to also talk to you a little bit about the support and resources that are available. So the agenda is very much that. We have a look at the International GCSE English as a Second Language. We do a general overview. We shall talk through the assessment objectives and the weightings. We'll have a look at the general topic areas and subtopics. And then we're going to have a look at paper 1, reading, paper 3, writing, and we'll talk about support and contact. So for the qualification overview, then we can say that first teaching was September 2023. So lots of you who are currently teaching this specification will have already taught the first term and a bit. And first assessment, that means the first exam will be available in June 2025. Pearson Edexcel International GCSE English as a Second Language then consists of 4 components. So listening, speaking, reading and writing, and we're going to look at those over the course of today and Wednesday. It's a linear qualification, so that means that all 4 papers are taken at the end of the course of study. So there is no coursework element. There is only a final assessment in each of the 4 skills at the end of the course. And the assessment, the exam is all externally assessed. So that means as teachers, you don't need to assess or mark any parts of the test. So everything is marked and assessed by Pearson. You do, of course, need to conduct the speaking test, but we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. And it has a single tier of entry. Those of you who may be familiar with UK qualifications might know that sometimes we have 2 tiers. We have a foundation tier entry for the less able students and a higher tier entry for the more able students. But that's not the case here. Everything is a single tier of entry. So it's just one exam that covers everybody. So let's just have a look then at the relationship of the assessment objectives to the papers. So each of the papers, as you see there, is worth 25%, and each of the papers targets an assessment objective. So important that you understand that. And if we look at the assessment objectives themselves, assessment objective 1 is reading, so it's making sure that they can understand and provide a response in written English to a variety of types of written English. So that's the reading skill. Assessment objective 2 is the listening skill, so listening comprehension. Assessment objective 3 is writing, that's responding to and using apologies for that. There we go. And assessment objective 4 is speaking. I think it's important just to be clear with you as well, and we'll mention it when we talk about the reading paper in a moment, but for both reading and listening, we are also only testing comprehension, understanding. So when students answer questions in English, if there are mistakes in the English, if there are spelling errors or grammatical errors, it's okay as long as the person who's marking it can understand the student's intended answer. So we're only marking for quality of language, if you like, in assessment objective 3 and 4. That's in speaking and writing. And we'll say more about that as we go through. Okay, and we mentioned the assessment objectives there. So we're going to move on now, and I want to just talk to you a little bit about the topic areas and the topic coverage. In the resources download, you have a link to the specification. That's the syllabus. That's the technical information that you need as a teacher to understand. That is there. And the topic areas are covered there, but we're going to have a look at them now together. So we have, 5 topics. So let's have a look at topics 1, 2, and 3. So each topic has a broad definition, if you like, in terms of a broad title. So topic 1 is myself and others. Topic 2 is travel and tourism, and topic 3 is education. And each of those topics splits down, as you see there. So topic 1, myself and others, and it splits down into hobbies and leisure time, homes, family, friends and relationships. Topic 2 is travel and tourism, and that's transport and accommodation, tourist activities, travel destinations, and reason for traveling. And topic 3 splits down into education, as you can see there, school life, future plans, etc. And then we move on, and we've got 2 more topics. We've got topic 4 and topic 5. We've got employment and global issues. So employment is part-time and voluntary work, future employment plans and job applications. And topic 5 is an optional one. We'll talk more about that when we talk about the writing, but students will need to choose one topic from environment, equality, or the media to be prepared to write and also speak about when we get to look at those. Okay, so when we look at topics 1 to 3, everything there is compulsory. And when we look at topic 5, there is a choice. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Okay, now I'm going to sort of say a few things to you about the grammar and vocabulary lists now. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about those. In Appendix 2 of the specification, you'll find a grammar list. And the grammar list contains examples of grammatical knowledge expected at each of the CEFR, the Common European Framework levels A1, A2 and B1, B2. So that's the sort of level, if you're familiar with that framework, that you're aiming for with this qualification. Okay, so this is English as a second language. It's not a first language qualification, but we are kind of looking at up to about B2 level. And there are some more examples of the grammar used at different levels, and you can find those on the Global Scale of English teacher toolkit, and that's available via that link. We'll try and get the PowerPoint for today sent out to you so that you have that link. But equally, if you Google Global Scale of English GSE Teacher Toolkit, you will grammar there, you will find that link. And that's a useful reference point for your teaching, because there's always a lot to do when you're a teacher, but you also don't want to spend time dealing with things beyond the level that you need to deal with. We need to sort of target the levels that are required for the qualification. Now, I'm also going to sort of say a little bit about vocabulary. There's a core vocabulary list as well, and that's Appendix 3 in the specification. And the vocabulary list contains examples of vocabulary knowledge expected at levels A1 to B2 and by topic. And there are some further examples also in that Global Scale of English Teacher Toolkit in the vocabulary section. The vocabulary list in the specification is not an inclusive list, so there is no guarantee that only that vocabulary will be part of the assessment, but it is a list that the people who set the exams will work as closely as they can with to make sure that we are dealing with that list in the main. Okay, but it is possible that words from outside the list, particularly if they're kind of considered fairly sort of common English words, they could be asked to deal with some of those words. Right, okay, good. So we're going to have a look now. We're going to sort of start thinking about the two papers that we're going to deal with today. So we'll start by talking about the reading paper, and we're going to just talk you through the paper and some of the skills that are required. So for the reading paper then, students need to read and understand a range of both formal and informal texts. And when we say formal, we mean things that maybe could be newspaper articles, things that are written for a formal audience, and also informal texts, which can be, you know, emails to friends and that kind of thing. So there's a variety of text type. As you'll understand, that sort of means that we have a variety of language as well. So if we have a formal text, we're going to have perhaps some more kind of technical terms, and we will have a kind of sense of formality. And if we have an informal text, we might have some slightly more colloquial language, although given that this is a qualification that only goes as far as the sort of V2 on that framework, we're not expecting that we're going to have really to expect students to understand highly colloquial English, but there will be that sort of feel there across those texts. So there will be that range of formal and informal. And what do they need to do? Well, they need to identify key information. So they're going to need to pick out details. They need to draw some comparisons. And they also need to sometimes distinguish facts and ideas. They're also going to need to identify the writer's viewpoint stated explicitly. Okay, this is what I think, says the writer, or inferred. You know, how do we know that the writer is critical of such and such a thing? So they will need, particularly as they get to the sort of more challenging parts of the reading paper, sometimes they need to draw inferences there. So again, it's something that teachers might want to work a little bit on, that whole idea of inference, you know, and you can find examples of that on the website, but we can talk a bit more about that as we go through and as we start to look at some of the structure of the paper. Students also need to understand a wide range of grammatical structures. You know, the things that are detailed in the grammar list, and they also need to show understanding of the vocabulary, as you'd expect, of course, on a reading paper. Now, just a few things really to say, I suppose, about the exam, the test itself. The first exam is going to be in June 2025, and it's a 1-hour exam, and there are 50 marks. So a little more than a minute per mark students have. And again, this can be quite useful for students to just think, actually, I'll have a look at the number of marks for this passage, and that's more or less the number of minutes I ought to spend on it. I think that's kind of some quite useful guidance sometimes for students. 50 marks, but 60 minutes. So that allows you to spend about a minute per mark doing it, and then you can have 10 minutes left to check at the end. There are 6 texts, and these are of varying lengths, and they come from a variety of different sources. Some of the texts as well are divided into 2 or more paragraphs followed by questions. So where the texts are a bit longer, the first paragraph is there, and then the questions follow the first paragraph, and so on, so that we've given some signposting to the students so that they don't have a long text and then a long list of questions and get lost with where the information is likely to be in the text. The texts also increase in length and challenge as the paper progresses. So what that means is that for each of the papers, and this is true really across all 4 of the papers, the easiest questions are at the beginning, and what we consider to be the most difficult questions, the most challenging questions, are at the end. And that's again useful information for teachers, because as you do practice tests and things with your students, you'll start to see, actually, you know, by about question 4, this student was really starting to struggle, and that's an indicator of the kind of level that your students are performing at as you're sort of assessing them through your normal teaching routines. And no dictionaries are allowed in the exam, so students are expected to deal with that exam paper just as it's presented to them. So no additional material or support is allowed. Now, I talked to you at the beginning about the topics, and that there are those 5 thematic areas, 5 topic areas, if you like. For the reading paper, the texts only relate to topic areas 1 to 4. And I mentioned this idea of that sort of global topic at the end being optional. We'll see when we talk about the writing and speaking where that fits in. But you can be confident that you won't need to teach reading skills or listening skills related to topic 5. So actually there are only 4 topic areas that you need to teach, and 4 topic areas that will be required for assessment for the reading paper. As mentioned, there's a range of text types. So there could be factual information, there might be explanation, there could be instructions and opinions. So all of those, of course, take students into different areas of language, and that kind of enables them to develop and demonstrate their ability in English widely and in different contexts. There's also a range of task types. So we have multiple choice questions, so they will have to choose between several options. There are multiple response questions. Those are the ones where maybe they tick, 4 boxes out of so many. We've got sentence completion questions. We've got fill in the blanks, and we've also got open response questions. And I mentioned that the papers begin with the sort of easiest tasks and move up to the most difficult tasks. And that's also reflected in the task type, if you see what I mean. So at the beginning of the paper, we're starting with multiple choice questions. They're objective questions. The answer is there in front of the students. And the students just need to tick the box. But as we get towards the end of the paper, we are asking a question in English, and they're going to need to answer that question in English. There's a maximum of 2 task types in each text. So we might find that, some of the texts where they're split, but we're not going to have more than 2 task types. Okay, and you will also sort of see there that certain tasks will kind of follow, and that okay, so we sort of see that information. Okay, so sorry, I think I muted myself. I think it's worth just saying as well, it's really important for teachers and students to understand that all answers will come from the text. So even if kind of common sense or experience or something that might say, okay, well, that's an obvious answer. We're testing reading comprehension, so we won't be expecting students to think of anything outside the text. And we're also very carefully trying to make sure that none of the answers depend on the student's sort of cultural knowledge or general knowledge or anything like that. So the only sort of things, obviously, grammatically and so on, you might be wanting to make sure that they're aware that, proper nouns will start with a capital letter. So they may come across the name of a place, for example, that they haven't come across before, but you should be able to identify that as a place from the words around it, and by the fact that it's a city that starts with a capital letter. But beyond that, we're not expecting specific cultural knowledge in order to be able to answer the questions. I think that's kind of quite important for students to understand. Okay, so now let's have a look at the structure then of the reading paper. So we'll start by just talking about text 1 and text 2. So text 1, well, there are sort of particular kind of stimulus text types. So it might be a collection of short text, but there'll be adverts, invitations, a timetable, a bulletin board, that kind of thing. So short text, and each text on a sort of individual subject, if you like, with a kind of contained message within it. And for text one, we're going to have multiple choice and multiple response questions. Text two could be an email, letter, set of adverts. As you see now, because we're talking about email and letter, we're not just talking adverts, so we're not just saying boat for sale, things like this. What we're saying is we're going to have a slightly longer kind of text type now. So we've got emails, letter, so more extended text, set of adverts, more extended in text two, just stepping up the level a little bit. And here we've got multiple response questions or gap fill. So if we have a look at text one, okay, so we've got the example of the multiple choice type question there. So that multiple choice type question, text says, every week the art teacher, Mr. Jones, helps us to draw or paint a different building, person or plant. He gives us all the paints and equipment. Just bring an old shirt. Painting is fun, but messy. Okay, so we've got that text one, short text. Okay, we've got a multiple choice question. Okay, and in this case, a multiple choice question supported by a visual. What do students need to take to the art club? And C is the answer. They need to take the old shirt. But in terms of how the assessment works, remember, of course, that it will never be just as simple as picking out that one old shirt word from the text, because the other two options, A and B, are what we would call distractors. And you see that those are mentioned. Okay, so we know paint. Well, we have paint there as a verb, but paint, of course, a pot of paint is there as a distractor. And we see the word plant mentioned, and there is a picture of a plant there. Okay, so this is a kind of principle for those multiple choice type questions, that there will be distractors. So it's not as simple as it may look for your students. They have to find the word. And it's also worth doing some work with them just to train them to make sure that they really read the question carefully. You know, you could very easily half read that question and choose plant because you saw the word plant in the text. So read carefully, and in those multiple choice questions, you may also find that there are those distracting elements because there are things that are in the text mentioned that are not the correct answer. Okay, good. And then text one continues, and we see now a different kind of question format, questions format with words that students need to read. And again, we can expect that there will be some elements of distraction. Okay, and again, you know, where does the drama club meet? In C, the old music room, the school hall, or the canteen. If you just have a look at those questions, and you just skim through the text, you can see again, music room, school hall, and canteen are all mentioned in the text. So spotting a word is not enough. Students need to process the whole of the text in order to be able to rule out those. So we meet every Tuesday afternoon 3:30 to 5:30 in the old music room, which is behind the school hall and next to the canteen. So the answer is A, of course, the old music room, but we see rather school hall and canteen also mentioned. Okay. So let's have a look at question 2 type question. Okay, so sometimes we see questions of this nature as well. So which of the completed statements about school clubs are true? And this is a multiple completion type question where students need to tick 3 correct boxes. So they're ticking 3 out of 6. Again, be careful that your students read all of those sentences carefully, and that they only tick 3, that they only cross 3 rather. Okay, oops, did we jump? That's it. So if we have a look at text 2 then, so we're looking at text 2 question 3 now, and there you see that multiple completion question in action. Okay, so they have to tick the 3 correct boxes, but again, those elements of distraction that we mentioned in the context of the multiple choice questions, you will find those there as well. And it's a useful activity sometimes with students to ask them to find the correct answer, but also to work out why the wrong answers are wrong. You know, that why was in that first one, why was plant wrong? Well, you didn't need to bring the plant because the plant was the thing that you drew, and teach students to work to unpick those questions and to understand how the assessment is working and to look for those elements of distraction. And that can be a useful task in developing that reading skill and making sure that they really target their answers. Now, text 2 continues, and then we have question 4. So we're into text 2. As we see, we've got these longer texts now, and we've got a different kind of question type. We've got a gap fill question type coming along now. So students are required to read the text, obviously, and then comprehension is tested by students choosing the word from the box there that fits into the gap. So again, just make sure your students definitely use the word from the box. Sometimes students ignore the box and write in the word that they would like to put in there, but it has to be chosen from the box. But again, in terms of teaching students strategy for those, something you could do is to A to E there, they could write against each of those words where they could possibly fit in. Okay, George and Helena went for a bike. George and Helena went for a bike ride in the morning. Could be possible. Before, no. After, no. Night, possible. Fried rice, no. While, no. Pizza, no. Evening, possible. Burgers, no. Ice cream, afternoon, possible. Okay, so we can begin to narrow down the choices. Okay, they played basketball, something, they ate ice creams. Okay, before is possible, after is possible, while is possible. Okay, so as a first step here, what we're asking students to do maybe is to narrow down those choices, and that's the kind of strategy that they can use to begin to answer that question. The question types will be consistent, and so if you train a student on a particular strategy for dealing with question 4, they can be confident that every year, every time there's a question 4, they can use that strategy. So it's a useful activity, really, just to make sure that they have the strategies to answer the questions. Okay, so we looked at text 1 and text 2. We're going to think now about text 3 and text 4. We're going to think about text 3. So the stimulus types, again, are letter, email, letter, set of adverts, article this time. So picking up the level of demand and picking up the level of the questioning, if you like. So the text will be a bit harder, but what the students actually need to do becomes a bit harder, because we've got multiple response questions. So that's the tick 3 box type questions. And we've also now got short open response questions. Those are the questions where they need to write a very short, simple answer in English. Text 4 is the text type is a more general interest type text, so recipe, an email, a blog post, a report, etc. So again, we're moving to a slightly more extended text, and also to a slightly more difficult text, and we're also moving to that sort of slightly more challenging question type. So we've got the multiple choice, but we've also got the short open response questions here. So now that sort of mixture of objective questions and the questions where they need to answer in English. So text 3 then. So text 3 is question 5. So we see, and you can see, can't you, already, just looking at that we've got a much more complex text. You also notice, I mentioned that we're not assuming particular cultural knowledge, but I mentioned the thing about capital letters, didn't I? About, so Tiananmen Square is mentioned there, the Forbidden City. And so students don't need to know anything about China to be able to answer the questions related to this. But just what we would expect them to do is to understand. Okay, so students say, I don't know what Tiananmen Square means. Well, you maybe know square, but just the fact that it's got a capital letter in English indicates that it's a place. So that's all kind of part and parcel of the skill that students need to be developing to understand the texts that come their way. You see, also in that text we have more extended sentences, but the sentences are still not very long sentences, and kind of individual sentences. We're not seeing a lot of subordinate clauses or anything like that. We'll see those things later. Almost each sentence is a complete thought in itself. So again, just keep in mind those things. So when we're kind of getting to this level, we're still not extending sentences very much with subordinate clauses. And question 5 there is that free response question. Now, I think it's just worth mentioning to you the rubric at the top. You do not need to write in full sentences. And for each question, write no more than 5 words. The questions are kind of designed so that they can be answered in just a few words. And obviously, we need to make sure that students choose just the correct words from the text, or they manipulate the language very slightly in order to answer the question. And the idea of no more than 5 words means that students can't just copy down a chunk of the text. sort of hoping that the answer might be there somewhere. We need to have precise information, and we need to have precise and concise answers. So the answers need to be short, just a few words, and then that's absolutely fine. Okay. And, you know, in which country had Asmita and Yusuf wanted to visit for a long time? We just need the answer China. We don't need them to answer they wanted to visit China for a long time. We don't need a sentence. So again, less is more. And again, I did mention at the beginning that correct spelling in English, provided it produces a recognizable word that the examiner can understand, those candidates will get those marks for that. We're not testing spelling, although it's difficult in English to spell China any other way. But if they spelt China, perhaps Chinah, and they put an H on the end, they could still have that mark. That would still be recognizable for an English speaker. Okay. And then question 6 is the multiple completion task. And we said as well, we've spoken about that one already. So they have to tick 3 correct boxes. You see as well, now we're sort of into text 3, getting towards the end, we see that there's more kind of subordination there. So there are a few buildings there, but they're quite small. There is a large lake in the garden, so we'll go on a boat ride. We think it will be our favorite part of the day. So we see that those sentences are getting a little bit longer, with some kind of subordinating, coordinating, with some conjunctions appearing in there. Okay. Now we move on to text 4. So text 4 increases in difficulty. And you're already looking at that recipe. You look at that second sentence. We haven't replaced the lamb mince with anything like vegetarian mince or lentils because the dish doesn't need them. Okay, and we're getting now longer sentences, and we're seeing that there's that kind of element of subordination appearing in there. So it's kind of useful for you just to look at how we sort of are kind of developing these texts and increasing the levels of difficulty. And all of the same things that we said about multiple choice questions elsewhere will also apply here. But look, the text continues, and we're seeing this longer text. We're also seeing perhaps some slightly more specialist vocabulary. Sometimes there will be items of vocabulary that students are not so familiar with here, but you know, I think where we have those words, like basil, for example, it says, then add a few basil leaves. Basil adds a sweet taste to the sauce. If you add the leaves too early, their taste is spoiled. So you may or may not know what basil is, but you know that it's something with leaves. And so you might be able to think, well, actually, that's a herb. And you know what it's doing to the dish. So sometimes there will be words here where students need to kind of work to understand what that word means if it's not something that they're immediately familiar with, but it's supported through the text. In that paragraph that begins, finally make a white sauce, melt the butter in a small pan and then add the flour. Slowly pour in the milk. Now, pour in may be a word that students don't know in isolation. The verb to pour is quite a quite an unusual word, I suppose, in English, but slowly pour in the milk. So slowly do something with the milk and stir. And so actually, if you're following the flow of the story, following the flow of the recipe carefully, you could deduce the meaning of that word. And again, this is a useful sort of activity for teachers to be doing, to pick out some words from the text that you maybe think would be not words that students could immediately know or think of, and ask them to deduce what that word means from the words around it, because this is the skill that can sometimes help them in the exam situation. And text 4 now this is on to question 8, and question 8 is again the free response questions, and all the things that we said before about the free response questions that don't need full sentences and should be answered concisely, briefly, in no more than 5 words. Okay, and we'll move on now to have a look at text 5 and text 6. So text 5, the stimulus text type, is a general interest type. It's a recipe, an email, blog post, report, etc. The question types are multiple choice and short open response questions. And text 6 could be general interest, article, blog post, report, etc. And question types are multiple choice and short open response. Okay. So if we have a look at our text 5 now, again, we see we are increasing in the levels of complexity, and we're also seeing some much longer sentences, aren't we? Now, if you look at that paragraph that begins secondly, and the second sentence, it will be the first time most of us will have lived away from home, so we will be finding out what it is like to cook and clean for ourselves and get to places on time without our parents' help. So I've got a very long sentence there. So you see the level of complexity is starting to increase. Okay. However, you will notice that there is sort of signposting through that text, firstly, secondly, finally. There is sort of guidance within the text for students to be able to find answers to questions. And question 9 then has 6 marks. Free response questions, again, no need to write in full sentences. And again, we need those answers to be shorter than 5 words in length. Again, this is just to stop students copying out a sort of section of the text, hoping the answer's there. They've got to answer the question. It's worth also with the multiple choice questions. In some cases, you will notice that there is some guidance for students in question E, for example. They're guided to where they can find a particular phrase or word, so they're to pick out some specific information from the text. And also, I want to mention for question F, it says name one hobby or activity that Sandra did at school, and the one is in bold. And so what students can assume from that is that there might be a list of several, there might be several possible answers to that question, but only one is required. So it doesn't need to be the first one in the list of hobbies or activities. We just need one. And again, just try to train your students to look out for those words in bold. Sometimes it might ask for 2 things, just one hobby or activity here, and we only need one. So that is something that they need to be just aware of, that we just want one thing there. Don't write a long list. If they do write a list of possible answers to that question, the examiners will mark only the first one. So if they're lucky and the first one is correct, they will get the mark. But if they've written 2 or 3 answers and the first one is incorrect, but answer 2 is correct, they don't get the mark. So important just to make sure that they read the question carefully and they answer it, and they do what the exam paper asks them to do, and only that. Okay. So then text 5 continues, and we've got those little sort of speaking head type things. We've got the people who are giving their view there, and you can see again we've got some slightly more unusual vocabulary sometimes appearing. Sam says university is certainly full of opportunities. I went to university to study English, and in my first year, I joined the drama club. I soon realized that I loved making costumes and props. I switched course, and now I'm in my final year of a theatre design course. So in there again, there are some words that students might not immediately know. Props is quite an unusual word, but of course it's supported by, it's a drama club, the context, and that it's something that he's making. So he's making something. So that those words around that sometimes can help the students to find the meaning of a word. I switched course and now I'm in my final year. Switched, not quite so unusual as prop, but it's still a word that might not immediately come to mind. But I switched course and now I'm in a final year of theatre design. So that he started with English and at the end he was doing theatre design. So you should be able to deduce that switched means changed. Okay. And question 10 then is that kind of multiple choice question. And again, all of the things we said earlier on about multiple choice questions. Look at 10B there. What course is Sam studying? English drama or theatre design? And all of those 3 things are mentioned. And the students need to understand it's not what he was studying. You need to understand the time frame of that question, because that's the subject that he's actually studying at the time he's writing. Okay, so again, just watch out for those distractions all the time in multiple choice, because what we're testing is whether the student has really understood the text. And we move on now to text 6. Okay, now obviously, as you see, a much longer text. Now students are required to understand much more. We're seeing some longer sentences. We're seeing some perhaps more unusual vocabulary. Not all of the unusual vocabulary is necessarily tested. So students need, when they get to text 6, to accept that there may be words that they don't know, and that's okay, because they don't need all of those words to answer all of the questions. And what they do need to do is to find the correct answers to the questions that they are asked. So text 6 then, question 11 and question 12. So we've got those multiple choice type questions appearing there. Okay. But we're also asking students to draw some inferences here, to draw some conclusions. In question 11, for example, question B, the phrase "a shoestring budget" suggests the centre has plenty of money to pay the staff, would like to have more money, does not look after its money well. And so students need to find that sentence in the text, and they need to understand that that means that, that the shoestring budget, and it's an unusual phrase, isn't it? We need to understand from the context what that's likely to mean. That means that's B, isn't it? That they would like to have more money, but they are told in the text the limitations of the budget, and so you have to deduce that information from the text. Okay, so these vocabulary deduction skills that I talked about earlier on in a simple format are then explicitly tested later on. Okay, and so again, be familiar with the idea that there may be phrases, there may be idiomatic parts of the language that the students are not familiar with, but that are useful skills for them to develop in terms of developing their comprehension skills. So don't leave those inference skills just for these long texts at the end. Develop them all the way through, I suppose, is the message. And then text 6, question 13 is the free response type question. And again, the same information about short, concise answers will hold true there as well. If we have a look at the mark schemes now, I want to just say a few things about the mark schemes. It's important, I think, for teachers to know, and for students as well, to be confident that when they answer questions for particularly free response questions, like those questions that we're seeing there in question 5, that the acceptable answers, that's not a complete list of acceptable answers. So what examiners are checking is that the candidates, the students, have shown evidence that they understand. Okay, so for example, in 5C1, speaks excellent or good English. Okay, if they put speaks English very well or has a very good level of English, those would probably get a mark. Okay, and even though the exact wording is not there on the mark scheme, if comprehension is demonstrated, then the mark is given. Okay, so that is really an important principle in assessing and marking students' work. So provided they've demonstrated comprehension and they've answered the question, then that's okay. Question 5A, visiting China. Okay, but going to China on a visit would be, going to China. Okay, traveling to China would probably be acceptable as an answer there. So not every acceptable answer can always be included in the mark scheme. Obviously, we have thousands and thousands of students every year doing this test, and so we can't include on the mark scheme every possible answer that we're going to accept or every possible answer that we're going to reject. And so that's useful, I think, for teachers to understand that the mark schemes are an indication of the correct answer. What examiners are really interested in is, has this student demonstrated comprehension? Have they shown that they understand? Okay, now that's taken us through the reading test. I'm going to suggest that we have a very brief pause, just for 3 or 4 minutes now. So if people need to kind of step away for a moment. So actually, if we come back in about 5 minutes, we can go on, and then we'll have a look at the writing paper. So if we just give you 5 minutes, on my clock in the UK, it's 10:02 now. So if we come back at 10:07, and then we'll think about the writing. If you have any questions about reading, jot them down now, and this is a good moment to reflect and think about anything you'd like to ask at the end.
Regina, this is my laptop. It was mine. Here is this.
Okay, if we're back around and people are ready, I was just in the little break checking that on the chat we had dealt with any questions. Could I ask if everybody would mind just to mute themselves so that we don't have any people in the background? I just had a question in the chat which I was answering during the little break about the exact question pattern for reading, and you can be confident that the exact question pattern will be as we've discussed and shown now. So every year we will have that same pattern of questions of multiple choice, multiple response, and so on. So I just wanted to sort of reassure you that is, and that's part of what is actually part of what's rather nice about this specification because there won't be any surprises for students on the exam day. Okay. Right, so we're going to have a look at the writing paper now, and this is paper 3. Okay, so just to tell you some of the things that students are required to do, then they need to convey information in writing on a range of topics, and they need to use context-specific vocabulary. They need to express their opinions on a topic and develop their ideas. They need to write for a variety of purposes and in a variety of styles, both formal and informal. And when we say purposes, we mean things like it could be a letter, could be an email, could be an article, could be a blog post. So that's what we mean really by different purposes. And the styles could be formal and informal. So clearly, if it's they're writing an article, it's supposed to be a magazine or a newspaper article, it will have a more formal style. If they're writing an email to a friend, that could be a more informal style. They're also going to need to summarize longer passages of text without copying phrases word for word. And they need to write fluently and coherently using a range of grammatical structures. It's interesting today that we're looking at both the reading and the writing, because I think as teachers, you can use the writing paper sometimes as a guide to the kind of level of language that we would like students to produce when they write. And they might not do it at the same sort of level as text 6, but students who can kind of produce good quality English at the level of text 4, text 5 perhaps, are doing pretty well. Yes, and I had a question about the pattern of questions. I will answer all your questions at the end. Was the reason to have the little break was just to see whether we had questions. But yes, I mean, please, I think one of the things that's really important about this specification is that everything is public. There are no secrets, and there should be no secrets and no surprises. So certainly practice everything with younger students, and make sure that for each question that the students do, that they've got a range of strategies so that they always know where to start. And they should also be confident in both reading and writing and listening and speaking when we talk about it on Wednesday, that the questions that appear will appear in the same format, and we'll ask them to do the same things and will work in the same way. Just that the topics, of course, will be different. So it won't be the same exam every year, but it will be the same structure, the same format. Okay. Now, the writing paper is 1 hour and 15 minutes long and 50 marks. There are 3 tasks, which are writing for different purposes in the appropriate register. The tasks reflect real-life situations relevant to candidates and their backgrounds, and the candidates answer all 3 questions, and they can do them in any order. They can address them in any order. Most students just like to start at the beginning and work through, but they can do them in any order. And the tasks relate to all 5 topic areas. So you remember that we said that we weren't going to test topic area 5 for reading, but for writing we do. And we'll see a little more about that in a moment. So task 1 is an informal writing task. So it's an informal piece of writing, could be an email to a friend, for example. It has there is a short description of the situation and the purpose, so students are told what it is they have to do, and they need to aim to write about 80 words in English. And there are 3 bullet points detailing what to include in the response. and the task is based on topic areas 1 to 4. Okay, so it's only topic areas 1 to 4. So 10 marks are available for this task. It's important to remind you now that each of the papers starts with the easiest task and moves on to the most challenging task. So task 1 in writing is designed to be the easiest task. So task 1 for the able students will be very easy. But still, it's important that they make sure that they do what the task asks them to do. Write 80 words. Don't write 150 words. It's important to write round about the 80 words. Now, whatever amount of words students write, examiners will look at that, but it's important for students to manage their time effectively in the exam and try to stick to that word count, even if they are really good students, because this is a task designed for the weaker students, for them to show that they have some English that they can write as well. So there isn't credit within the way this task is marked for the really excellent students. They just probably automatically get the full 10 marks. Okay, so for those able students, okay, you can keep it simple in this task. And we don't need to see huge amounts of complex language or unusual vocabulary. You don't need to show off in this task, even if you're an able student. Wait and do that later on. So task 1 looks something like this. So they're told what it is they need to do. You want to go shopping with your friend at the weekend. Write an email to your friend about this. In your email, you must ask your friend to go shopping with you, write why you want to go shopping, and suggest where to meet your friend, and aim to write approximately 80 words in English. Now, to address that task really effectively, you really kind of need to guide your students to write about between 25 and 30 words for each of those bullet points. Try to deal with each of those bullet points equally, because that way we have the range and variety of language and vocabulary and structure that you would like to have, and that we've covered all of the topics. But it's a good idea to try to do those things in a fairly simple way, but make sure that they cover each of those equally. So if you say to them between 25 and 30 words, and it's a good idea if they do that in 3 simple short paragraphs. Okay, ask your friend to go shopping with you and say, hello, would you like to go shopping with me? I would like to go shopping on Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. And then you've probably done your 25 to 30 words. Okay, so we can keep it nice and simple. Write why you want to go shopping. I want to go shopping because I need to buy some new clothes for a party at the weekend. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Okay, so keep it nice and simple there. And there isn't any need to show off complex language, because you have opportunities to do that later. And students need to, if they're good, able students, they need to try to save the time in the exam for when they need it to deal with more complex tasks. As you see, the mark scheme for the 10 marks, there are 5 marks for communication and content and 5 marks for linguistic knowledge and accuracy. If it's really important that in that 5 mark band, full coverage of the required information with some development. That was just what I showed you there. I want to go shopping because I need to buy some new clothes for a party at the weekend, and that counts as some development, but it covers the bullet point. Okay, appropriate tone and register. Communication is generally clear, but with some ambiguity. And notice, because this is not a task that's designed for the most able students, it's designed to give, if you like, the weakest students a way to show the ability that they do have. We only need it to be generally clear, and a little bit of ambiguity is okay. Okay, and that goes for the linguistic knowledge and accuracy as well. Vocabulary is appropriate for most of the task, most of the response. Good, straightforward, and some complex structures that are generally effectively used. And vocabulary and structures are accurate for most of the response. So for those full 5 marks in each of those 2 categories, I think the message is that we don't need what they write to be perfect. Okay, so just generally good is okay for the 5 marks there, because the task is targeted where it's targeted. Amanda was just asking a question about whether the examiner will keep reading to the end. And yes, I think they are expected to keep reading to the end, but I would still keep training your students to write to the word count that is suggested. My sort of experience as an examiner, you know, is that answers that are too long or too short tend to be self-penalizing. If you write too much, you maybe make more mistakes, and you start putting in information that's irrelevant, and so the communication and content and the linguistic knowledge and accuracy are lost. And if you write too little, you don't have enough content, and you don't have enough range of language. So examiners will mark to the end, but really the students who follow the instruction carefully and are trained well to write to the word count should be the ones who are most likely to do best. Just to mention as well, there's a little bit of kind of comment there about cohesive devices, paragraphing and punctuation. You know, I did mention, you know, in those 3 bullet points, 3 separate paragraphs. You see that is really helpful if you do that, so that that's organized according to the bullet points. And in terms of the things that are cohesive devices, have a look at the reading paper and look at the things that the features of English that are exemplified there, and try to get students to include some of those things in their writing. Now, task 2 is a semi-formal writing task. So it's a semi-formal piece of writing, for example, an article. It's that the students are given a short description of the situation and the purpose. There are 3 bullet points that again outline what to include. And there's a choice of 3 tasks. Now, these come from topic 5 global issues. So combines one of the topic 5 global issues subtopics and one of the compulsory topics 1 to 4. So students choose the task based on their chosen subtopic from topic 5. Okay, and students need to write here, we're looking for 180 words in English, and the use of a range of grammatical structures and vocabulary. We'll have a look at the task in a moment. But the key thing, of course, now is the 3 bullet points. We've still got the 3 bullet points, and now we're looking for 180. So we're double what we had in the previous one per bullet point to cover the task off effectively, to show the range of language and vocabulary that they need. Again, we're looking really for about 3 lots of 60 words. Okay, can go a little bit over or a little bit under on some of them, but good practice is 3 lots of 60 words. And, you know, most students have a sort of an idea of how many words in their handwriting fit on a line. So they don't really need to do an awful lot of counting. But if they know that on average they manage about 10 words per line, if for this task they write 6 lines, 3 paragraphs and 6 lines for each answer to each of those bullet points, they're probably about right. Okay, so we don't need a lot of time spent counting words and certainly crossing words out and that sort of thing, but they should have in their mind their sort of strategy. So it may be that for task 1 they need 3 lots of 3 lines, and in task 2 they think I need 3 lots of 6 lines. But however you do, it's good for them to have that sort of strategy in mind, and to try to work within the word count as far as they possibly can. So task 2 then is either question 2A or 2B or 2C. So taken from that global theme there, say 2B, you've been asked to write an article for the school magazine about how people use media to connect with others. Okay. So they're given a lot of guidance about what they have to include. So write about 2 types of media that people use to connect with others. So we want about 60 words about 2 types of media. So they might write about the internet and newspapers, or they might write about television and radio and so on. Okay. They might write about social media, and they might write about writing letters. That would be absolutely fine. So that's a descriptive task, and we ask for 2. Again, they need to be careful that they are covering off those things equally. So we said about 6 lines, but actually you might write 3 lines about social media and then 3 lines about newspapers, and that would be about right. Okay, so just this sort of strategic approach, I think, can be useful. And then write about 2 possible problems when using media to connect with others. So we want 2 possible problems. When students do that, it can sometimes be useful to give an introductory statement. 2 possible problems when using media are this and something else. With regard to the first problem, and they say something about it, and with regard to the second problem, they say something about it. So again, as teachers, you might want to be sort of teaching them ways in which they signpost and sequence the information, so that the examiner, when they read it, is absolutely clear about what that student is saying, and that student is saying absolutely clearly, I am doing exactly what the task has asked me to do. And then the third bullet point, which is a sort of freer response, explain how important media is to you as a way of connecting with others. Okay. And again, notice that all of these are about the media that people use to connect with others. When you get to how important media is for you as a way of connecting with others, we need students to talk about both elements of that, not just how important, how much they love social media, but as a way of connecting with others. So it's how you use it and how you connect with others. And the how important means that we're looking for opinions, and we're looking for those justified opinions. And at a more sophisticated level, you know, it may be that students sort of say, I like this aspect because, and I dislike this aspect because. Okay, so that we've got that idea that there's something evaluative going on there for the students at the top end. And so you see the mark scheme now is a mark out of 10 for each of those 2 components: communication and content, and linguistic knowledge and accuracy. We've got full coverage of the required information with frequent development. Consistently uses, sorry, can I get people to mute, please? I can just hear voices. Consistently uses appropriate tone and register for the task, and communication is clear with occasional ambiguity. So it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. But again, looking back to the reading paper for sort of particularly that kind of task, that text 5 is a sort of guide to where we might expect the best students to be. And for the range of vocabulary, consistently accurate language, consistently accurate vocabulary, straightforward and complex structures, and consistently accurate use of vocabulary and structures with only minor errors. So in the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, we're looking for range of both vocabulary and structure, and we're also looking for accuracy. And so it's kind of quite important to just think about those elements. Don't, as a teacher as well, neglect the idea of range. We come across, for example, certain vocabulary items that get really overused, like the word problem. So maybe, you know, if you have those vocabulary items that you notice students are using a lot, we need some synonyms there. We need students to be replacing problem with challenge or difficulty. And doing some of those things can also broaden the range of vocabulary. Okay. And task 3 then is a summary writing task. So this is a semi-formal or formal summary of a text which is between 400 and 450 words. So there are 3 bullet points which outline what to include. And this is a task based on a topic area drawn from one of the compulsory topics. This is from the 1 to 4. So students need to use their own words where possible. They need to use, again, the range of grammatical structures and vocabulary, and they need to aim to write 180 words in English. All of the same advice that we gave about the 3 bullet points. So 180 words, about 60 words about each bullet point, 6 lines if that's how your handwriting works out. And so they kind of begin with their sort of strategic plan there. So the text is provided and looks like that, and you can see that there are some subheadings and so on there as well. And the task, I can see a couple of questions coming in the chat. I'll deal with those in a moment, but just bear with me. So task 3, we'll ask the students to do this summary task. In your summary, you must write about 2 positives of studying overseas, write about 2 negatives of studying overseas, and based on the points in the text, explain whether all school students should spend some time studying overseas. Okay, you must use your own words where possible, and remember to use a range of grammatical structures and vocabulary in your response, and aim to write 180 words in English. Now, this is clearly the most complex writing task that the students will need to do, because it isn't just about responding to a bullet point as it was in tasks 1 and task 2. They also need to respond to a stimulus text that they have to read. So they have to read that text. But they do see those bullet points, and it's obviously important for you as teachers to be teaching them the strategies to deal with this task. So they might want to make some notes about the positives of studying overseas. So read it through almost as if it was a comprehension task, okay? And you make that into a question. What are the positives of studying overseas? Read it through, and what does the text say? Write 2 negatives of studying, so make it into a comprehension question. What are the negatives of studying overseas? Read it through, jot down the answers. What does the text say? And then based on the points in the text, explain whether all students should spend some time studying overseas. Okay, so once you've done that, you can look at the points in the text. You've got the positives and negatives, and then you're giving your response to those. It says use your own words where possible. It isn't always going to be possible, but it is important that students aim to use their own words where possible. Remember to use a range of grammatical structures and vocabulary, and aim to write approximately 180 words in English. The use your own words where possible is something where teachers can usefully do some work on developing students' ability to express something that they find in the text in a slightly different way. So you can pick out some sentences from the text, and we're just going to sort of change that. We might just change the order of it. We might use some synonyms. We might just change the order of the phrasing and so on. So if we have a sentence that says, although something there is, okay, just changing the structure of that to there is, but also we see, for example, could be a way of developing students' ability to use their own words. So those are the kind of this is the task, but also think about the skill, drilling down into the skills that are required for that. Okay. Okay. Now, you have a look at the mark scheme. You see now we're demanding more, we're asking for more. Full coverage of the information, so they need to do everything the bullet point asks, and full coverage probably also means roughly equal coverage. Appropriate tone and register, clear communication, a little bit of ambiguity. I mean, when this is not a university degree in English, this is an international GCSE, so we're not expecting absolute perfection, but nevertheless it's very good and clear and consistent. But if you look at the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, very good attempt at using own vocabulary, wide range of vocabulary that's consistently appropriate to the task. So that very good use, very good attempt at using their own vocabulary. This can even be looking at those positives and negatives in the task that we saw and thinking, what synonyms do I know for some of those words that are there? And this is not just noun synonyms, this can also be verb synonyms, you know, changing begin to start, or start to begin, or begin to commence. A useful thing for teachers to be doing, to be thinking particularly around some of those high frequency verbs in English. You know, is there a sort of a cluster of verbs or words that kind of fit together that are interchangeable? And I mentioned as well things like problem, difficulty, challenge go well together. And so sometimes those are words, sometimes they're almost like a synonymous phrase, you know. So advantage could be sometimes replaced by good point, for example. So some work on that from teachers can be kind of helpful, just getting students used to thinking about using some of their own vocabulary. And again, the own structures, that might be something to do with moving across a different time frame and so on and so forth. But as far as we possibly can, think about how we manipulate those structures. And I kind of gave that example, you know, of kind of a sentence with a subordinate clause and a subordinating conjunction. But sometimes you might be able to swap that sentence around and use a different conjunction, and that shows that sort of ability, is one way that you might show that ability to manipulate the structure. And of course, the accuracy, we all understand what we mean by accuracy, I think. Now, I'm going to just talk to you very briefly about support and contact, and then I'll stop sharing my screen. And if people have got kind of questions that they'd like to ask, we'll try and answer them now. And if I can't answer them now, we'll pick up on those on Wednesday, or get answers over to you as soon as we possibly can. So in terms of support, then supporting and planning and teaching this qualification, there's a Get Started guide on the website, and that gives you the overview of the qualification to help you understand the changes to content and assessment, and what these changes mean for teachers and learners. There's an editable course planner, and there are schemes of work, and there are mapping documents that highlight key differences between the new and previous qualifications. And do keep looking at the website, because more information gradually comes along as the course gets going. For teaching and learning, there are some skills maps that highlight opportunities for learners to develop skills which are assessed, as well as skills which are not directly assessed. And, the skills that are not directly assessed are just these things like using synonymous words or synonymous phrases, changing the structure of sentences. We're not directly assessing those. They're never given a sentence and told, please rewrite this sentence using synonyms for these words. But those are skills which are kind of inherently useful, for example, as you just saw for that task 3. And we've got our print and digital learning and teaching resources that will be kind of promoting this sort of anytime, any place learning to sort of encourage new ways of working. So preparing for exams, then there's a range of resources to help you prepare learners for the assessment. So we've got specimen papers to use as lesson resources or for mock exams. There are examiner commentaries. Well, there won't be examiner commentaries until after the first exam, but certainly in 2025, after your students have done the first exam in the September, when you start with your new year, and I know everybody's always very busy at the start of the academic year, but that is really an important moment to be looking very carefully at the website and having a look at the examiner commentaries and the principal examiner reports, because there will be really sort of contextualized feedback there. You will begin to understand the things that went right, the things that went wrong, and look for that sort of list of tips that come from the principal examiner's response to the real live assessment. At the moment, we think we know what sort of answers and things students are going to do until we actually see the first live assessment, the first set of exam papers. We don't 100% know, and that's just a normal part of this kind of qualification. And there's a variety of online resources available through Edexcel online. The website really is the go-to place to find out and to look at published resources and so on and so forth, and also what might be coming along to support you further. We'll mention our subject advisor. So we've got a subject advisor at Pearson. So she's Rebecca Waker, and it says Walker there, but actually her name is Waker, so I don't know why it says Walker. And you can follow her on Twitter. You can have also, if you'd like to email teachinglanguages@pearson.com, and we also put the phone number there. You can also sign up for a monthly newsletter, so that's kind of a good thing to do, and those sign up links are also in that slide. Rebecca doesn't answer it. She leads this team of people who will be able to help you, so she and her team will be able to answer questions, technical specific questions, or if you're wanting to know, when will a certain book be ready or that kind of thing. She is the person who will know all of that, because she kind of connects the support that we provide for centres with the things that are happening on in assessment. So do please email. It's absolutely fine to email, and they are very good at getting back there. As I say, that she isn't just there on her own. I think there's a team of people who support. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will pop my video on if it's working. Yeah, I'm here, and I guess it's just useful now to know if we have any sort of specific questions that people would like to ask, and I'll try and answer them if I can. If I can't, we can maybe take them back and try to find you an answer, or we get Rebecca to contact you about it. Does anybody have any I hope you found it useful anyway today, just to and hopefully it's confirmed a lot of what you thought you knew already. Okay, so let's have a look in the chat. Okay, right, that's fine. Yes, yes, I think if you put your hand up, do go ahead. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Hello.
Just want to ask. My students, they're at grade 8 at this point. They will appear at the 1st June 2025. So at this point, they have only made the student book available and no previous question paper. So it's the first time, the new specification.
Yeah.
But let's say we have gone through the student book and we have exhausted the resource. Then how about, what are the next resources? I mean, let's say that's the only book and there are no new specimens, etc. So what are the new resources we can use? Newspaper article, book.
Yeah.
What would be your suggestion?
You're also I don't know whether there are any more specimen assessments coming along, so I'll find out about that. I think for the writing tasks, it's quite straightforward, really, to replicate you can produce those yourself, can't you? I think you can kind of replicate the format and layout of those. And I think really, if your students are at the sort of level that they're at, don't be kind of limited by this qualification. People will have all sorts of students at different levels, and they will. I mean, they have two objectives, don't they? One is to pass and get this qualification, which they want to do, but they also just want to be good at English. So I think you just work at developing the English that they have a little bit more widely. And so you can do that by with kind of newspaper articles and all sorts of things that you find. And I think all I would say is that as you're doing that, just try to develop tasks that look similar to what Pearson are doing. So those multiple choice, multiple completion, those fill in the gap type tasks, so that you keep the exam practice going, if that makes some sort of sense.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, and I can see in the chat, such as articles for students who are going to take. Yeah, so I can see we've got a question in the chat. I'd like to ask if we could have more semi-formal writing samples, such as articles for students who are going to take the essay. Yes, I'll find out about what's happening for that. But what I think we will say for teachers is that what you can be confident about is the format and the consistency of the tests that the students will do. So just as I was saying, if you find an article and you want to use that as a reading activity, you decide more or less where it fits question, text 1 to text 6. So if you think actually it's about the level of text 5, and if you're producing some activities for students to do, produce some multiple choice questions with distractors. So the multiple choice has the correct answer and then 3 incorrect answers, but that look possible according to the text, with a word or a phrase that's taken. And then it's maybe a part 2 then with the free response. So I think try to replicate. So as you're producing materials, try to sort of replicate the tasks that are required. And if you're producing writing tasks as well, it's all of that stuff that you see from the sample assessment. You quite often can set a writing task for almost anything on the specification just by changing a word or two from those sample assessments. So I think the key message is that there shouldn't be any surprises on exam day for students or for teachers. So you won't know the exact topic that's going to be tested, but you will know the format of the test. And so as you're teaching and preparing your students, work very closely to those formats. But I'll ask and see if I can find some information about whether some further sample assessment materials are going to be produced. Okay. Anybody else? No. Okay. Well, I think if I've kind of answered everything that everybody wanted to think about at the moment, we can kind of call it a day for the session today. Obviously, I'm back, and hopefully most of you will be back on Wednesday when we talk about the speaking and we talk about the listening. And so if you do think of anything in the meantime, then that's absolutely fine. We'll try and answer that then. And if I can find an answer to the question about more specimen assessments, we can do that. Yes, people are asking whether they could have the recording. Yes, the recording should be sent out to you, and we'll try and make sure you get a copy of the PowerPoint as well, because I think that's sometimes useful if you're in a departmental team and you want to refer back to it. But I suppose at that point, I just say thank you very much. It's great to work with you all. I forgot to ask where in the world everybody was at the beginning, but I'm guessing you're all over everywhere. So whatever time it is, Italy, yes, oh lovely, Italy, China, Bangladesh, Shanghai, crikey, good, okay, that's good. Azerbaijan, Myanmar, oh, Amanda in the UK. Nigeria, wow, excellent. Bangladesh. So nowhere in the Americas so far, but otherwise everywhere else, every other continent we seem to be looking at. Okay. Right, look, thank you everybody. Let's we'll call it a day there, and I'll let you get on and enjoy the rest of your day. If you're going back to work to work, or if you finish for the day, I'm envious, because in the UK, of course, our day is just starting, and we'll hopefully see you again on Wednesday. Okay, take care then. Thank you. Bye bye.